Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. So last year I talked about this thing where the IRS would start looking at accounts that were over $600. I didn't think it was as bad as people made it out to be, but it was still something that I found interesting. And what I find interesting now is this news article that shows that a lot of businesses, right after there was this little loophole where Zelle did not count, all these businesses magically just started saying, we take Zelle, not Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal or anything else, which is particularly interesting. It says small businesses find a loophole in the new tax law. Zelle, the payment service, says it doesn't have to disclose transactions to the IRS, but its users are still subject to the same rules. Earlier this year, Benson, owner of Houston appliance reseller Vendap, noticed that his suppliers are no longer accepting payments through Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App. They'd just say, I prefer Zelle. The share of his suppliers using Zelle jumped to 60% from 15% in a few weeks. A couple of them talked about why. It's because at the end of the day, with Zelle or cash, they decide what to show to the IRS. Now, there are two potential causes for this. Behind door number one, these people could simply be tax cheats that don't want to pay their taxes. Behind door number two, there are people that don't want to give more information to an agency that is going to put them through 16 months of hell, like, I don't know, let's just hypothetically say getting audited over the period of 16 months, only for them to find, after asking for damn near $1 million, that your actual error rate was only 0.1%, which, oh boy, we are going to dig into that shit in a future video, I assure you. Trust me, that is coming. But there is a real question here as to what the incentive structures are. Is it that all these small businesses are tax cheats, or is it that they simply do not want to provide more paperwork that is then going to confuse an auditor who is going to torture you for 6 months as they ask for literally 100 times more than they're actually entitled for, which is, again, one of the reasons that I had more hair last year than I do this year. He's referring to an IRS rule change that came into effect on January 1st, 2022, requiring third-party payment processors such as Venmo and PayPal to issue 1099-K forms to any users who receive more than $600 in payments via their apps and also file them directly with the IRS. Previously, Venmo and other apps issued 1099-Ks only for customers with gross payments exceeding $20,000 who'd made more than 200 such transactions, but small businesses nationwide have found a loophole. Zelle. Zelle says the new rule doesn't apply to it, a bank-to-bank payment service, because it's a network that doesn't hold funds. Now, Zelle is something that many of you, use Bank of America, Chase, or any other major bank are probably familiar with. You just put in somebody's email address or phone number and you can send them money. You don't have to pay fees. It's instant. It's easy. It's fairly simple. Again, in my opinion, this is not really something that is, this is not exactly the smart way to avoid taxes. If somebody says, pay me in cash, I kind of get that. If somebody says, pay me in Monero, I get that. If somebody says, pay me via Zelle, where there is a record in my bank statements that directly has your name and all of your information, that's one of those things where that's not exactly the smart way to get paid off the books. This is one of those things where if you're looking to avoid taxes versus just looking to avoid having confusing documentation you have to deal with, this is not really the way to do it. Again, I'm not saying I avoid taxes, but if I were to avoid taxes, I would say I take cash only. I would say pay me in Monero. I wouldn't say pay me with Zelle using my real name, my real phone number, my real bank account, where there is a digital record of the transaction that is viewable to any auditor that logs into my online banking. That just doesn't make sense to me. Katao's company continues to accept payments in half a dozen forms, most often Venmo, Cash App, or Zelle, like many businesses that were already documenting all their income for the IRS. But gig workers and small business owners, especially those just scraping by, are alarmed by the new law. A lot of people think they're just doing a side gig or a small potato, so why should they pay taxes, says Stephen Rosenthal, a senior fellow at the Urban Bookings Tax Policy Center. An IRS analysis of the 2014 through 2016 estimated that unreported individual and small business activities cost $144 billion in taxes a year and found that Americans report less than half of the income that isn't automatically reported for them. Now, I read through that and I kind of get an idea of where they're coming from or what they're trying to say, but I really don't understand the methodology that's being used here to say something like that. Like, we don't know what's not being reported. I could understand something where in a neighborhood you had 7 people who looked different arrested for burglary and 10 people who said that they were victimized by very different looking people. You might think to yourself, okay, we still have 3 people left to catch. When it comes to this, I really don't understand how it is they're coming to that particular conclusion, especially, again, as somebody who just finished an audit where they wanted this much money and they found out that my actual error rate was 0.11%. Sometimes I just kind of tend to be a little bit skeptical of those estimates based on my own personal experience. Rosenthal suspects this is a drastic underestimate. I think the level of non-compliance from small business is staggering, he says. Although Zelle offers a core service similar to those of PayPal, Cash App, Google Pay, and other competitors, it was originally built as Clear Exchange, a peer-to-peer payment service for a consortium of major banks. Today, it's integrated into users' bank dashboards and run by Early Warning Services, which is jointly owned by 7 banks. The service is an electronic network that manages automated clearinghouse transactions. ACH networks are not subject to 1099 reporting, says Wendy Walker, chair of the Information Reporting Subgroup of the IRS Advisory Council. A competitor, Chuck, which launched in January, is a similar bank-to-bank network. A Zelle spokeswoman said in an email that payments sent through its network are not subject to this law. Small business banking users turn to Zelle because it makes it easier to complete digital payments where they bank, true, enabling easier bookkeeping, true, and accounting by having these small businesses' data at one source, she said, adding that they see a benefit in having money in their bank accounts not held by third parties. Very true if anybody has ever gotten fucked over by PayPal and had their money held for 6 months, which I've talked about in many recent videos. And again, whether we're talking about PayPal now deciding they're going to keep the 2.9% fee for refunds, which they didn't used to do, whether we're talking about them screwing people over and holding people's money for long periods of time, which I have talked about as far back as 9 years ago on my website blog, which you can see over here. Or if we're just talking about them finding people for misinformation and the absolute horrible PR that was going on around this entire thing, yes, there are a lot of reasons that people may want to switch off of PayPal and Venmo that might not just have to do with taxes. Because again, if you are looking to avoid taxes, Cash, Monero, kind of understand it. A digital transaction attached to your name, phone number, and bank account, kind of stupid. The spokeswoman said Zelle couldn't speculate on other reasons people might use its service and declined to provide 2022 data on user figures. Good! That's another reason to use Zelle. They are declining to provide usage data about their users. Thank you. More of that, please. That's not a bad thing. Rosenthal suggests exercising caution before jumping over to Zelle, pointing to the IRS's push to harness technology to enforce long-dodged tax laws. It's a dangerous game for tax sheets to migrate to Zelle, he says. It wouldn't be hard for the IRS to unravel that. True, which again is the reason that I'm suggesting that there may be some other reasons behind people migrating over to Zelle rather than it just being that they want to avoid taxes, because again, that's a bad way to do it. He sees 2 likely outcomes if people continue abandoning payment services that issue 1099-K forms in favor of Zelle. Congress could extend the law to Zelle, or the IRS could investigate, perhaps seeking customer names from Zelle, for heightening auditing scrutiny. Now, there is the chance here at the end of the day that more and more people are looking to avoid taxes. And maybe they are actually ill-informed enough to believe that this is a good way to do it, which it is not. If that is the case, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying you shouldn't pay your taxes. I'm just saying that when the price of everything goes up 20 to 30% over the course of a few years, at a time when retail rents are already $100 to $500 a square foot in places like New York City, and you have entire city blocks that are just pretty much empty and for lease, where nobody is renting anything, like I go over in this video over here, this might be part of the reason that you have people that are looking to avoid paying their taxes. Here I'm just walking through what used to be vibrant New York City neighborhoods that for the past several years have been completely empty because landlords still expect their $100 to $500 per square foot, and people are not able to pay it anymore. So you have entire city blocks where there is just no business. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying you should do it. But again, if prices go up 20 to 30%, you're already paying $100 to $500 a square foot for your business. Your employees now want a 20 to 30% raise to counteract inflation and everything else. And your customers are willing to pay less money because they have less money because they're spending more money on gas, food, and everything else. Something's got to give. And I can understand why you may have some small businesses that are deciding that paying taxes honestly might be one of those places where things should give. Not saying it's right, but there's a lot of small businesses out there that are literally incapable of paying taxes, because if they had to pay taxes, if you took 20 to 30% away from what they were paying their employees and what they were collecting, at the end of the day, they would not have a business, because that is literally the margin that they are running on. But I really don't think that this is actually the case here. I think this is the case of maybe a combination of 3 things. A, PayPal and Venmo are complete pieces of shit. Again, they keep fees that they used to not keep. They freeze people's accounts for complete bullshit reasons with no customer support. They have horrible responses to finding people for misinformation, which I go over in this video, combined with the fact that they are now dealing with this new 1099-K reporting, which again, Call me cynical, but as somebody who has spent 16 months explaining to an auditor why I don't owe them 6 to close to 7 figures for only for them to, at the absolute end of it, come out with this, yeah, maybe I want them to have a little less paperwork. Maybe I want them to see what I report rather than them having pages from 20 different agencies or 20 different payment systems, because the more confused you are, the longer that audit will go on, and the longer that audit goes on, the less hair I have. I need my hair. I'm single. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.